As long as you're careful with your pinning and everything, you can save it and just keep making skirt after skirt for yourself. Okay, now you can unfold your skirt. And this is what it looks like. Nothing special quite yet, but it will be soon. Okay, set your skirt part aside.
Do you hate it when a YouTube tutorial leads you astray? Well, that happened to me with a plus-size circle skirt tutorial. The directions were all wrong, but from that mistake, I created a skirt pattern that anyone can do. Hi, I'm Robin Bird. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can make your own easy, no zipper, no buttonhole, do-it-yourself skirt pattern that will fit anyone and look unique. This breezy summer skirt includes a ruffle, hand sewing closures, and fabric buttons. You'll learn some couture sewing techniques that are actually very easy, along with some very simple pattern making. I recommend making a practice pattern first. We're all unique when it comes to fitting. The tools you'll use are sewing shears, paper scissors, marker pencils, a calculator, measuring tape that has a hole at the end, any ruler, and some fabric you wish to use. You'll also need drawing paper. I recommend any large paper you have that needs to be used up. If you're working on a wooden table, you can use a thumbtack when drafting your pattern. If not, you might like to use cardboard with a pin, or you might choose to use neither. You'll see more when we get to the drafting steps. You'll need pins, but you might prefer paper weights. And if you prefer cutting fabric with a rotary cutter, you can use that instead of shears. You might be wondering, can I really trust this tutorial to teach me how to do this? And can I make it in a day? That's why this video is a complete step-by-step tutorial, so it's easy to make and mistake-free. You can make it in a day depending on your skill level. And if you want to explore variations, I'll provide suggestions for that as well. Have you ever sewn a pattern that didn't fit right? Usually you'd alter the pattern or adjust the garment afterwards. But a do-it-yourself pattern drafted from your own measurement is much easier and will give you a perfect fit. This pattern fits anyone, regardless of age or size. Those of you who have made circle skirts will see similarities, but the Mona skirt is different from some typical ways you've learned to draft circle skirts. First, measure the width and the length of our skirt. So start by noting where your waist is. I recommend just tying a string around your waist. You'll need to know where your hips fall, so measure 8 inches down from your waist. You're going to measure a lower hip arc measurement. Measure from the center of the side of your body. Note this measurement down. Take your measurement from your lower hip arc and multiply it by 2. If you were measuring your hips, you would measure the circumference, which means that you'd wrap your measuring tape all the way around. You don't need to do that here. Just measure your lower hip arc measurement and multiply it by 2. Easy. When I measured myself, my hip arc measurement was 14.5 inches. I multiplied that by 2 and got 29 inches. I added 1 inch and I got 30 inches. Let's call that measurement letter A. Just like a circle skirt, the Mona skirt also uses the radius of a circle. To do this, we'll take our letter A measurement, mine was 30 inches, and divide that by 2 to equal letter B. You can see that mine was 15 inches. Divide whatever you got for letter B by 3.14. We can call that measurement letter C. Once you have the measurement for C, round up to the nearest quarter inch. So if it is 0.24 or below, round it to 0.25. If it is above 0.25, round it to 0.50. If it is above 0.50, round it up to the next quarter inch or the next full number. So my letter C was 4.77, which I rounded up to 5 inches. Whatever it is for you, write this number down. You also might be thinking, how easy is it? And what if I don't like things like drafting or mathematics? Let me tell you a story. When I was in high school, when it came to mathematics, I really didn't like it. One day, my dad saw me throwing a huge mathematics textbook against the wall. So he talked to me and he said, Robin, you just need a tutor for math, so I'm going to get you one. Similarly, this pattern will be easy for you. As someone who overcame math challenges, I can assure you that if I can do it, so can you. Because do-it-yourself patterns are straightforward, and although they involve some math, I'll guide you through each step with clear visuals and examples. So if you've dreamed about making your own pattern, I'm here to be your tutor and help you. Let's learn how to draft the pattern. Pay attention to how I pin down the tape measure at one end, either with a tack or with my finger, and then at the other end, I use a pencil through the hole and the tape measure to draw a curve. So to begin drawing your pattern, you can use any ruler to mark a corner at the side of your paper. A corner mark acts as an anchor so you can draw your waistline. Here's where you have a choice on how you would like to use a pivot technique to draw your circle. Go back to what you wrote down as your measurement for letter C. You remember that mine was 5 inches. Pierce the measuring tape at that mark, put your marker pencil in the hole, and slowly move the measuring tape from one end of the paper to the other end. This becomes the waistline of your pattern. Measure from your waist to a desired spot for your hem. Here are some common skirt lengths to help you decide. This is approximately where your skirt will fall with the main skirt plus a ruffle. Take whatever measurement you decided on and add 1 inch. Let's call that letter D. Go back to your notes and check what you wrote down for letter C. D, the letter C, and the sun will equal letter E. E will equal your pattern length, so write that down. Now you're going to draw an outer circle for the hem of your pattern. Draw the corner lines to the edge of the paper. Find your measurement for letter E on your measuring tape and pierce the tape with a tack or a pin, pinning the tape to the paper at that spot. Place your marker pen or pencil through the hole of the measuring tape and draw a circular line from one end of the paper to the other using a pendulum swing. This outer circle will become the hemline of your skirt. Now that you've drawn your skirt pattern piece, cut it out with your paper scissors. You're also going to create a ruffle and stitch it to the hem. While I've got your attention, I'd love to hear in the comments below if you enjoy do-it-yourself pattern tutorials. And if you find this tutorial valuable and want more, hit the subscribe button as it helps me create and share more content like this. You've completed your skirt pattern piece, but you still have to make the ruffle pattern piece. You'll be surprised at how easy this is. To make the ruffle piece, measure a curved line up from the bottom of the skirt pattern. To do this, you will need to estimate 20% of the length of your pattern piece. Example, if the length of your skirt was 20 inches, then 20% of that would be 4 inches, so your ruffle would be 4 inches. Once you measure the width of the ruffle piece, draw the circle as shown and cut the ruffle piece off from the skirt piece. The next step involves folding and cutting the fabric. Before you lay out the material, pay attention to exactly how it is folded and where to cut it because that's important. And if you like, try using a smaller practice piece of fabric first. It'll make it easier for you to see the final result. Folding the fabric. Lay the fabric out. Fold the fabric so that each cut edge is folded onto itself lengthwise or hot dog style. Check that the sides of your fabric look the same as mine. Repeat this step one more time. You can see what that would look like. There is one single fold and one double fold at each side of the fabric. You can see me demonstrate on my fabric. Fold the fabric hamburger style. I'm demonstrating this fold with my fabric. When you finish, you will have 2 double folds in 2 sections of the fabric like so. Here's what it looks like when you've done all the folds. Make sure that you have the cut edges of the fabric facing away from you and the folded edge in the corner should be near you. This is very important because you're going to cut the corner that is nearest to you and you don't want to have any unnecessary seams. Pinning and cutting the fabric for the skirt. Step 1. Place the pattern in the corner of the fabric and pin the pattern to the fabric. You can see me demonstrate this. Step 2. Cut the pattern out. Cut the entire corner out as well as the bottom of the skirt pieces. When I pick the pattern piece up, it looks like this. Next, we'll create 2 skirt pieces. Unpin where there is a double fold. pull one of the double folds down and cut through all parts of that one double fold. This will create 2 panels for your skirt. So when you will cut from the hem to the waist along the fold line through both layers of one of the double fold. This will give you 2 skirt pattern pieces. Notice what this looks like. Remove the pins and unfold the fabric. The Mona skirt has 2 skirt panels. When I unfold my fabric, I have 2 skirt panel pieces, which look something like this. Now we will cut out a rectangle shape for a waistband. Use leftover material from the main fabric that you've already cut. Measure your waist and at least 1 inch more. You can always cut it shorter later once you stitch it in place. Cut your waistband 2 to 4 inches wide, depending on what you would like. You won't need to worry about putting elastic through the waistband. Decide on the width based on your personal preference. Notice my little trick of using soap rather than tailor's chalk. This works wonderfully because the soap irons out and washes out of fabric. It's easy to use and sustainable, and it's also cheaper than tailor's chalk. When I drew my waistband, I drew it as 1 inch wide. I also cut 2 pieces, which I stitched together lengthwise. Then cut the waistband out. The last part of your fabric you will cut out will be the ruffle. Place the ruffle pattern piece on your contrasting fabric and cut out 6 to 8 pieces. When I created my skirt and my demo model, I used 6 pieces. So reserve some more of the same fabric just in case you need to cut out more ruffle pieces. It is better to have more pieces than less. I used silk for my ruffle, but I used a similar lightweight woven cotton when I did the ruffle for my demo skirt, and it also looked really nice. The difference was the silk was translucent and it looked really breezy for the summer weather. Now the next steps involve using simple stitches and a tip for gathering fabric. You'll notice that smaller skirts require a narrower seam than larger ones. Sewing the garment. Let's begin sewing the side seams. Place the skirt panels together, wrong side to wrong side. Stitch the sides of the panel together. On the skirt that I wore, I stitched 1 inch from the edge of the fabric. And on my small demo skirt model, I stitched 1/2 inch in from the edge of the fabric. To finish the seams, open them up and stitch a zigzag stitch along the edge, or you can overlock the edge. This is what it should look like when you're done. Press the side seams open. Let's begin gathering the skirt. Set your sewing machine on the widest stitch. Before you begin sewing, leave a long tail of the bobbin thread and upper thread. Later, you will pull this long tail to create the gathers. Stitch a gathering line to the upper skirt piece 1 inch from the edge of the fabric. Stitch along the entire top edge of the skirt panels. When you complete stitching the panels, leave another long tail of bobbin and upper threads behind. You will need to pull these threads to create the gathers. To create gathers, pull one of the long tail pieces on the right and left sides of the panels. Push the gathers along evenly. Continue pulling in and pushing the gathers along until you have finished gathering the top section of the skirt panels. Start by pulling in a little of the gathering and then secure your thread. Here's a sewing trick I use to secure the gathering thread so it won't unravel. Place a pin where the gathering starts. Wind the thread around the pin in the shape of a figure 8. This will keep your thread from unraveling while you're pulling in your gathers. You can see how the waistband will be pinned to the gathering at the top of the skirt and how we'll create a closure at the side of the skirt. No matter what size skirt and waistband you have, your gathering should look evenly distributed like mine. Try the skirt on to see that you have pulled the gathering in correctly for your waist measurement. When you're satisfied, secure the gathering in place with pins. In the next part, you'll sew the waistband. I'll share a little sewing hack to show you how to do that easily. You'll also notice that the way I position the buttons allows you to create a side slit. Fold the waistband piece that you cut in half lengthwise. Fold the fabric wrong side to wrong side. Stitch 1/4 inch from the side as I demonstrate here. To finish the waistband piece, you'll need to turn the waistband inside out. You can see that doing so by hand can become difficult. So here's a trick I use to turn the waistband out. Attach a safety pin to one end of one of the sides of the waistband. Push the safety pin inside the waistband and feed the safety pin all the way through to the other end. Continue this until until you have pulled the fabric all the way through to the other side. You will end up with a long tube and the seam is hidden on the inside. To attach the waistband to the skirt, begin by placing a pin in the center of the waistband. Place the center of the waistband towards the wrong side of the gathered top of the skirt and secure with a pin. Pin the waistband to the skirt. Don't worry if your waistband is longer than the skirt because you can trim it. Here you can see how I have completed the step of attaching the waistband to the skirt. Stitch the waistband to the skirt by stitching 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric and remove the pins as you go. Stitch carefully so that you will not have tucks. When finished, remove all of the gathering stitches. You can use a seam ripper to remove any excess threads. You can see what the waistband looks like when it's attached to the skirt. If you end up with an extra amount of length on the waistband, don't worry because you will trim that off. Let's begin stitching the ruffle to the hem. Begin by placing wrong sides of the ruffle pieces together and pin in place. Stitch along the sides 1/4 inch from the fabric. Back tack on each end. Remember to finish the stitches with an overlocker stitch or a zigzag stitch to prevent the fabric from fraying. Place the wrong side of the ruffle pieces to the wrong side of the skirt hem and pin in place like so. If you have any remaining ruffle fabric at each end, just trim it off. Stitch the ruffle to the hem 1/4 inch from the top of the fabric and from the right side of the garment all the way to the left side. Stitch a zigzag or overlocker stitch at the top end of the fabric to keep it from fraying. You can see that the Mona skirt has an interesting and unique closure. We will be using a hook and eye and snaps instead of a zipper. You'll be amazed at how easy that is. To begin, make sure that you leave enough room for a hook and eye near the waistband and a snap near the top of the skirt. For my skirt, I left a space for this closure by measuring down 5 inches from the top of the waistband of the skirt. Make a mark with your tailor's chalk. Place a pin where you put this mark so that it joins both pieces of fabric. This is where you'll place your first snap. Using your tailor's chalk, continue to measure and mark the places where you would like to put snaps. Make sure you evenly distribute where the snaps will go. Leave enough room for a slit from the bottom of the skirt to your last snap. You can see how I am creating a double rolled hem at the side of my skirt. I roll up 1/4 inch and then roll another 1/4 inch. I pin the hem in place. You could stitch it without ironing, but I recommend taking the time because it is so much easier to stitch when you do. Stitch the double rolled hem in place along the entire side of the skirt from the waistband all the way to the bottom of the ruffle. Use a small pin stitch. Sew carefully, stopping to take the pins out as you go. Repeat this step on the other side of the skirt. See how I've pinned a double rolled hem at the very bottom of my ruffle, and I iron it in place. I like to use glass pins because I can iron over them and they don't melt. I pinned my silk fabric up 1/4 inch and ironed it, then rolled it a second time 1/4 inch and ironed it in place once more. Just like before, I stitched the double rolled hem in place using a small pin stitch and stopped to take the pins out as I go. I stitched along the entire bottom of the ruffle from one side to another, and this became my final hem. I try the garment on once more, checking that it fits correctly.
Another question you might have is, how can I avoid zippers and buttonholes but still make the fabric buttons? Remember the clip where I groaned after cutting my fabric and thought all was lost? That YouTube tutorial for a plus-size circle skirt didn't exactly work out. But instead of discarding the fabric, I redesigned the whole pattern to create a unique skirt closure using simple methods. I'll offer suggestions at the end for some variations.
The next steps we are going to do involve hemming the skirt and creating a ruffle. After that, we'll sew our closure using a hook and eye and snap instead of a zipper. We'll also use fabric buttons as a pretty embellishment.
Consider fabric weight and tension spots when choosing closures for your Mona skirt. Options include using a snap, hook, and eye with a snap, or 2 hooks and eyes or snaps. For lightweight fabric like mine, a snap handles tension better than a hook and eye. For heavier fabric, consider using a larger hook and eye, similar to those used on trousers.
You already prepared the skirt closure. Stitched a double rolled hem at the side of the ruffle and the side of the skirt. Using a measuring tape, pins, and tailor's chalk, you marked where to put the snaps, hook, and eye. You measured and marked all the places you would like to put the snaps, evenly distributing them. You made sure to leave enough room for a slit from the bottom of the skirt to your last snap. First, your skirt closure will be a lap edge, which means that one side of the waistband will lap over top of the other. We can see here how I sewed the snaps in place, and
evenly distributed them, but the snaps are still showing through to the other side of the fabric. Often when you sew snaps on a garment, you have a fold of fabric such as on a shirt, and you can hide the snap underneath. But what do you do when you only have one piece of fabric and you don't want the snap to show through to the other side? Well, don't worry, because we're going to cleverly fix that in the last part of this video. Now we come to the final stage of the Mona skirt. We're going to create fabric buttons and then sew them right over the snaps as a pretty and unique embellishment. Once you make fabric buttons, you're going to want to make them again. They are so much fun to make, and you can jazz up many garments with them. You'll need paper scissors, a marker pen, buttons, thread, snips, something circular, a folded paper sheet, and a needle and thread. Step 1. Make a practice pattern circle and check to see that the diameter of the circle is correct and that the button will fit well inside the circle. Cut the paper circle out. This is your pattern. Step 2. Measure the button in the fabric circle. Step 3. Sew a running stitch halfway between the button and the edge of the fabric. Leave a tail of thread before you begin stitching. Step 4. Cover the button with the fabric by gently pulling the threads. Then make a knot and wrap the threads around the button shank a few times. Knot once more and snip the thread. Excellent! You've made your fabric buttons, but you still need to sew them on the garment. If you've ever sewn a shank button, sewing on the fabric button is really similar. Let's compare how to sew a shank button with how you'll sew your fabric button over top of a snap. Step 5. Sew the fabric button on a garment, measuring from the side of the garment to the side of the button. The fabric button is resting on top of the snap, so it will wobble a bit. When you sew the fabric button on, catch the fabric from the button with your needle, then sew it to the fabric on the garment. It's easiest if you stop the video right now to read my instructions on the screen. Use a lock stitch to make a knot, then snip the threads. Here's your new fabric button, and you can't even see the snap. Here's some variations if you're an intermediate sewist and more of a traditionalist. Keep the extra material on the waistline and put in a small little slit and make this into a wrap skirt. You could create buttonholes and you could also put in a zipper, and that would work too. But everything I've told you is not going to work if you forget one crucial element. This pattern won't fit you if you don't prepare your fabric. All the work you put in won't guarantee it's going to fit as well as it should. So this video will reveal the simple steps to prevent this from happening.